hip-hop fiction would be appropriate. People thought that it was going to be a fad, that it was here today, gone tomorrow, but it actually blossomed into so much more.
Writing urban fiction.
And Donald Driver.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Black Nouveau. I'm Milton Dockery.
And I'm Faithe. We're glad you could join us. September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. On this edition, we'll discuss the disease that affects 1 out of every 400 African Americans.
We'll profile Packers wide receiver Donald Driver and meet the cast of Yellowman, a play about class and skin tone among African Americans.
We'll also announce the winners of our From My Hometown contest. But first, J.M. Benjamin is an award-winning and Essence best-selling author. Our Liddy Collins reports he's also a man giving back to his community.
I mean, as far as the size, it's just so like, outside of that, as far as what's going on in your city. How do you feel about, what's taking place in school, in your community, things of that nature?
I know it's dangerous, the virus thing, depending on where you live in.
Depending on where you live?
Yeah.
What do you mean dangerous like how? Like,
you gotta watch your back 24/7.
24/7?
Mm-hmm.
In school, out of school?
In school, out of school.
My name is J.M. Benjamin. I'm an author. I'm here to talk to you guys and share with you where I come from.
J.M. Benjamin is a product of his environment. He grew up in a housing project in New Jersey. Bad choices landed him in prison.
By the time I was 14 years old, I was already carrying a gun and had been arrested and been in the juvenile detention center 5 or 6 times. By the time I was 15 years old, I was charged as an adult in North Carolina for drug trafficking and was sent to adult prison.
And prison is where Benjamin stumbled into the writing game. He was encouraged to write while in prison for 12 years. A counselor encouraged him to write a journal.
And I started writing. And first I thought long and hard as to where would I begin. And I started writing about the last time I had seen my dad when he was in prison. That whole experience. And what turned out to be something therapeutic and only intended to be a journal wound up becoming a 400-plus page manuscript.
In the late 1990s, early 2000, he discovered urban fiction and found that the journal he had written fit into that style.
The urban fiction is just a storyline based out of an urban setting. Things that go on in urban communities, meaning like lower housing incomes, poverty-stricken environments, dysfunctional homes, things of that nature.
He found that a lot of the urban fiction he had read was a misrepresentation, had a weak message or no message about the world he came from.
So I wanted to write the reality of what urban fiction, my opinion, of what urban fiction should deliver to a reader. I write hip-hop fiction, street lit, urban lit, with substance. The moral of the story is the bad guy does not get away. Yes, I do pin a tale where all of the things that go on in the urban communities, in the hood, in a negative light, I pour all of that into a storyline. But at the end of the day, I create an ending to where as though if our young people or ex-offender or someone straddling the fence reads a J.M. Benjamin book, they know that if you do this, these are the only results: death or imprisonment.
Since his release from prison in 2006, he's written numerous books, such as Down in the Dirty, Ride or Die Chick, Heaven and Earth. His books are fast-paced and exciting. He hasn't lost touch with where he comes from. So when he travels, he talks with youth about his history and overcoming his past.
I know that right now what's going on in my city back in New Jersey is going on right here in Milwaukee and in Chicago and in Indianapolis and in New York and St. Louis and so on and so forth, which is our young people are dying and going to jail younger and younger. And gang and street violence plays a significant part in it. And I'm not trying to tell you what you should do and what you have to do. That's not why I'm sitting here. I'm only sharing what I did and where it got me and what I had to do to overcome that and make it out. And what I had to do was unlearn and relearn a new way of thinking. By sharing this, my story and this information with you, it is my hope that I get you to move forward. This is what this is about right here. This is about the fact that I was a major contributor to the destruction of my community. That now that I've turned my life around, I owe it to my community to be a major part of the upliftment. So this right here, this is not only for you, this is for myself. No matter what, right?
For J.M. Benjamin, being a successful writer means being responsible.
My writing is the focal point of how I live, because I can't talk the talk and not walk the walk. And I realize that, again, I accept my responsibility, the responsibility that has been placed on me to make a difference through my writing. And what I mean by that is, every time I write a story, create a storyline about, the street guy or the street female, it's a constant reminder to me that I'm just one bad choice of decision away from returning back to prison. So when I write about this guy that's carrying this gun and, selling these drugs and, polluting the communities and corrupting the youth and degrading our women, disrespecting our people, or just people in general, not even so much as just African American, because it's really not about black, white, Latino. It's about us as a people. It makes me appreciate more how far I've come. And it makes me conscious of how much more work I still have to do.
Yellowman is a Pulitzer-nominated play by Dale Orlando Smith that deals with issues of race, class, and skin color within the African American community. It's beginning to run at the Milwaukee Rep this week, and we're joined by Erica Bradshaw and Ryan Quinn, the cast of Yellowman. Ryan and Erica, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Erica,
you for having us.
where does this play take place?
This play takes place in South Carolina, the islands right off of South Carolina, in an area called Russellville and St. Stephen's, which are, small islands right off of the South Carolina coast.
And of course, historically speaking, they're called the Seashell Islands.
Yes.
Will you have any Gullah dialect in this play?
We're going to have lots of Gullah dialect in this play. We couldn't do this play without some Gullah dialect.
But Erica, tell me what your character's about.
I play Alma, and Alma is the daughter of a woman who is very dark, and Alma came out a little bit lighter than the rest of her female family members that she can trace back. Okay. And it's Alma is struggling with finding who she is and being proud of herself, and yet dealing with the stigma of being a large black woman and how that plays out. Okay.
Ryan, tell us about your character.
I play Eugene Robert Gaines. I'm the son of a dark black man and a light black woman, and you kind of see the struggles of how it comes out being a lighter skinned man and a boy and a child in a culture that within that culture that discriminate against each other. You see it in the family, you see it in the outside, you see it as he's growing up with Alma too. Okay.
Now, as we said, the play deals with issues of race and class. Has it been your experience that skin tone still plays a role in the African American community? Either one of you.
Absolutely.
How?
How not? I kind of don't know how to answer that question without saying look around. It's very present. Okay. I have friends who are darker complexion than I am, who are in theater or at theater, and we have very different experiences based on that.
Give me an example of the different experience, though.
Okay. I often think that because I have a lighter skin tone, I'm thought of as less threatening. And my friends who are darker in the same business, regardless of what their true personality is, are instantly perceived as more negative, a little more intimidating, somewhat scary because of their coloring. Okay. I mean, one exact example is a friend of mine who's dark complexioned, and I went out and she said, watch how people deal with you and watch how people deal with me. We'll do the same smile, we'll do the same, warmth and everything. And I did have to, admit that people dealt with me differently and it seemed like no other reason than our coloring.
Let's push this a little further. I want to talk to you about this, Ryan. Does skin color and skin tone play a role, as she stated, in terms of how others see us as African Americans?
I mean, I think completely, and I think it's heightened 100% being actors and being in a vocation where your image decides who you play and what parts you go in for, and you can even tell in the casting breakdown maybe the coloring of the black person that's supposed to go in, and there are some parts that I just won't be called in for because I'm not quote unquote black enough.
I get the black enough too, yeah.
So what you guys are saying in a roundabout way that this can lead to typecasting?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
I don't get to go in typically for mean, aggressive, everything is going to be finger quotes, roles because I'm lighter, and that's not something that lighter supposedly does. Okay.
Now, the Rep often offers talkback sessions about the play. Would that occur for this play?
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
Now, how do you use those talkback sections briefly?
Well, I think every show is a little bit different. But usually it's just questions that the audience has for us about the play, about our experiences as an actor. But I think this one's even going to focus more on issues of race and questions like you're asking us today.
No. Also, Ryan, you grew up in racing.
I did.
Just when did you catch the acting bug, and how do you hone your craft, so to speak?
Oh, I guess I caught it going to school. I was fortunate enough to go, there was this program called Jefferson Lighthouse, so I went to the school there, and they encouraged a lot of creativity and projects that we worked on, and so some of it you could perform your research and do stuff like that, and so I think it came from that and my mom and my dad, yeah.
Very briefly, Erica, same question.
Very briefly, how did I get the acting bug? I think I always had it. It was there's a video my uncle took of me when I was 5, and he asked me what I want to be when I grow up. Okay. And I say that I want to be an actor, I want to sing, and not really dance, and that's pretty much what I do.
To the both of you, what do you hope the audience takes from this play?
Wow, that's a big question.
That is a big question.
And I got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, we were in rehearsal a little bit ago, and it's a very emotional play, and at the end of one day, I was like, why? Why am I putting myself through this? And I think what's amazing about theater is that it lets us connect and be empathetic towards each other. Okay. And with these issues of race, we don't talk about it in a way and where we are able to feel and understand each other's point of view. And I think this play raises it to the surface in a human level, and we're able to connect like that, and that's what theater does.
Erica, anything else you want to add to that briefly?
I want people to go away questioning the way they look at anyone and everyone. I want them to understand that sometimes the way we're raised gets in the way of what we can do in the present moment.
Thank you all for joining us. Yellowman plays at the Milwaukee Rep through November 13th, 2011.
He has a Super Bowl ring and the record for receiving yards for the Green Bay Packers. But as our Cherie Dallas reports, football is only a part of Donald Driver's contribution to his community.
On the field, he's proving to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. But it's what he does off the field that has Green Bay Packer Donald Driver becoming a favorite of fans everywhere.
There you go. Oh, you're welcome. Anything else?
According to those that work with Driver, it's the man and not the player that makes him so special. His passion for giving back to the various communities which he has personal ties is a true testament that this NFL player has not forgotten where he has come from.
He's one of the football players that gets it. He's a guy who has come from real humble beginnings, and he'll tell you the story of himself growing up and stealing cars and finally turning his life around and getting to where he feels that he can give back to society. I remember on the day that he signed his big contract, he started crying on the podium saying, now my grandma's not going to have to work anymore. And that was the biggest thing for him, not I can have a nice car and I can get some jewelry. It was my family's going to be set. And he's one of those guys that understands what football is doing for him and then what he can then do for other people. In fact, when we started Inside the Pack with Donald Driver, we said, well, what kind of payment do you want to work out? And he says, look, as long as my foundation is getting, I'd rather have you pay the foundation rather than pay me, because I'd really like to get this foundation started where they're giving away houses and they're giving away shelter for the Hurricane Katrina victims. And you know, we had our big night last Friday where they raised more than $60,000 for Katrina relief and to house families, and he knows what it's like to be homeless. And so he has come that long swing from one side to the other, and he does not forget it. And that's a great thing about Donald. He knows where he's come from, and he knows how many people are still there, and that he can help them and pull them back up there.
Donald, talk a little bit about your philosophy on giving back.
I remember when I was a kid, someone used to ask me for money on the street, and I go, I don't have it. But now when I go home, the same person that asked me years ago are older now. And I look at that person different than I looked at them when I was a kid, because I can be in that same boat, and I was in that same boat as they were. So I know how they feel when they said, can you let me borrow this, or can I have this? You know, people always say, when you say borrow, that means you're gonna pay them back. So and it's surprising because most people that I have met that's homeless always say, let me borrow. They don't say, let me have. And then I always ask them, are you gonna pay me back? And they say, one way or the other, I will. And that's not saying pay me back with money. It's paying me back by what they go out and do to help another person. And that's what I get from it.
Talk a little bit about the Donald Driver Foundation and its core mission.
You know, we started the foundation in 2000, and it was something that was dear to my heart because I grew up homeless, and I didn't have the backgrounds of the education side as well. So I was trying to make sure that kids get education as well as mothers and fathers are stable in an environment to where they don't have to, where their kids are stable. And you know, they always say a child is only as stable as their home. And we feel like that's why we make sure that, you know, homeless families are able to, you know, have a new beginning.
Recently, Donald and his wife Bettina hosted a gala to benefit victims of Hurricane Katrina. Nearly 200 friends shared their support and helped raise over $60,000.
Our foundation deals with the homeless issue, and right now, you think about it, right now they have about 750,000 people right now in New Orleans that's going to be homeless. And half of those families have moved to San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Arkansas, and we felt like it was time for our foundation to make a difference in not just single mothers, but just the homeless issue, period. Because, you know, my mom was a single mother. You know, I didn't have a dad, so it was kind of like, that's why I was making sure that women didn't have to depend on men. Because men, I feel like they should be that bread and that butter to go out and make that money for that woman to be at home and relax and take care of the kids. So that's why I strive to myself to making sure my wife never has to work a day in her life. So that's the reason that we started this, and we wanted to make sure that these families from Hurricane Katrina have a better life now. You know, and now I think they think their life is over, where the Donald Driver Foundation want to make it now and let them know that it's just beginning.
Sports agent Brian Lammy, also the president of the Driver Foundation, says Driver has set the bar high in the area of giving back.
Well, obviously, when I first met him, I didn't know a whole lot about him. And, you know, it's so many different athletes have different personalities, but I think I learned pretty quickly that obviously he's a guy who likes to give back. He's a guy who recognizes everybody in the room, is very friendly to everybody. I think he's as good of a person, you know, behind the scenes and off the camera as he is in front of it or when he's on the field, which is pretty special. So I think as I've gotten to know him more, I consider him a good friend, not just a client.
In each locker room, you find a handful of guys that are really interested in giving back to the community. In our locker room, he's one of them.
Donald, after you retire from football, which will say be now for another 20 years, what do you hope will remain as your legacy?
I remember Reggie White saying, you know, don't worry about him. You know, everyone was worrying about Reggie White that day. He said, don't worry about him. He always would say, don't worry about my legacy, worry about your own. And he left a legacy not just on that football field, but in the eyes of everyone in the country. And that's what I want to be able to do. You know, everyone knows me as the wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, but I want to be able to help so much in the community that they remember me just as that person.
So what's next for Donald Driver?
You know, it's real hard to say, you know, because my life is, I guess you can say, it's not over. And, you know, you have so many goals in life, and there's so many things that you would like to do. So I haven't put my finger on the whole life story yet, and what my goal and what God has given me to do. You know, I feel like it may be the homeless issue and education, but then something else may come up and say, you know something, let's do, instead of doing 2 things, let's do 3 things. So it's not over, you know, but I think right now it's just, my philosophy is just to make sure that people have a better life. And if that strives with, and that started with the Donald Driver Foundation in 2000.
Sickle cell anemia is a disease where the red blood cells form an abnormal crescent shape instead of the disc shape, and is most often found in people of African and Mediterranean descent. If unchecked or not treated, the disease can cause organ failure and death. We are joined by Penelope Stewart, Manager of Community Outreach for the Blood Center of Wisconsin. Welcome, Penelope.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me say this to you. Sickle cell really doesn't seem to get the kind of attention that most other diseases get. What is it that you want us to know about sickle cell anemia?
I want you to know that sickle cell disease is the most prevalent red cell disorder in the United States, and that it impacts 1 in 12 African Americans have sickle cell trait, and 1 in 400 have the sickle cell disease. And I think most people think that it just went away, but it is still very prevalent in our community.
What's the difference between the disease and the trait?
The difference between the disease is that your red cells actually sickle, just like a banana or a sickle, and they can get caught in the very fine vessels. With the sickle cell trait, you literally don't have the same condition as far as the cell sickling. So there is a difference with the trait. You don't have, with a person with a trait can go on and live a normal life, not require medication, not require blood transfusion, but that's not the case with a person who has sickle cell disease.
I understand that sickle cell doesn't necessarily have to be fatal, but it can be very painful. Can you explain that to us?
Yes. So I would say about the majority of patients with sickle cell disease, most of them will have a stroke without consistent blood transfusion. So for example, we have about 60 patients at Children's Hospital on a chronic transfusion program to treat their sickle cell disease. About 90% of those patients have had a stroke as young as the age of 2. The other have life-threatening pain. So that's something I think a lot of people don't realize, that you have little babies out there literally having strokes. And half of those patients are between the ages of 2 and 17.
So what is it that you're doing to recruit donors? How important are donors to your efforts?
Well, Faye, I think the most important thing is education. Just like letting people know this is something that's very real and very real in our community. So what we're doing is constantly educating people or telling the stories, just like I shared with you about the 60 patients. People are really surprised to hear that. So we're educating people about the need for matched blood. We're trying to increase the number of African American donors, because while you and I can receive blood from anyone, the best match is from someone within your own ethnic group, especially if you're consistently transfused, like the patients with sickle cell disease. So they kind of have an average of 33% of those patients can form a negative antibodies to blood that's not closely matched, versus a 2% chance for someone else who has a regular blood transfusion. So it's imperative that those patients have the best matched blood, which primarily comes from another African American.
I imagine that it's important that people, African Americans, are tested for sickle cell anemia.
Yes, and you know, now all newborn babies are screened for sickle cell disease. And even if you donate blood at Blood Center of Wisconsin, and if you have sickle cell trait, we will inform you of that. The important part about sickle cell trait and the disease is that the disease comes by when both parents carry that sickle cell trait. They have a 1 in 4 chance of their child having sickle cell disease. And we do have a lot of families in our community that have 2 kids with sickle cell disease. So if you're thinking about, you know, starting a family, it really is important to have that blood test to see if you have sickle cell trait and if your other mate has sickle cell trait. And I'm sure if you talk to some of the families and understand what some of those kids are going through as far as the pain, as far as the strokes, those are some things that you can prevent. But the best news is that we now can manage that pain crisis and those stroke situations now with our technology and with blood transfusions.
So if people want to get more information about how to become a donor and about how to, you know, manage their sickle cell or find out if they have it, how can they reach you?
They can call 1-877-BE-A-HERO. They can ask for me, Penelope Stewart. And of course, Blood Center has a research arm, and we're, for the last 30 years, been studying, trying to find a cure for sickle cell disease. And also, we just have a new doctor that came on board whose specialty is sickle cell disease for adults. And that was something we did not have in our community before. So his job is to try to manage those crisis situations so those patients don't have to go to the emergency room as often as they have in the past. So I would say if you want more information, go on our website, www.bcw.edu, or call the Blood Center at 1-877-BE-A-HERO.
Thank you, Penelope.
You're welcome.
Sat by my own 45s and drift away. I've come a long way from my hometown. Just one word to say, Motown. Tempting, temptations, miracles, and 4 times.
And now for the winners of the From My Hometown tickets, courtesy of the Milwaukee Rep.
The question we asked, Milwaukeean Al Jarreau won his first American Grammy for what album?
And the answer is Look to the Rainbow, a live album released in 1977.
And here are the 4 winners who will each win a pair of tickets to see From My Hometown, playing at the Milwaukee Rep through October 30th.
And that wraps up this edition of Black Nouveau.
Remember, in the coming week, do something to expand your world. Good night.
Good night, be safe, and thanks for watching.